Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 patch 2.4.3 Season 9 Monk build guide. For the past couple seasons, Generator Monks have dominated the Monk leaderboards, but they're kind of glass cannons. They dish out terrible damage, but die pretty easily. We'll present here a Generator build that mixes in the 6-piece bonus of the newly buffed Inna's set. Now, while it doesn't deal as much damage as pure Raiments, it has a lot more survivability, and I've still seen it clear greater rifts in the 90s on the test server. As I tried out this build, it actually felt really good to play a Generator Monk that could take a hit. So if you're looking to try something new, give this build a try. So first off, let's go over some basic numbers to compare the damage outputs. In this build, we're sacrificing two things that are important to a Generator Monk's damage: the 6-piece bonus of Raiments and Depth Diggers. The 6-piece Raiment bonus basically gives you 1,250% more damage. Losing that seems like a huge loss, but in fact, our Inna's 6-piece, along with our crudest boots, which we're going to want in our cube, basically bring us up to that number or close to it. With the buffed Inna's set plus crudest boots, we're actually gaining a 1,000% damage buff. That's 100% per Mystic Ally in patch 2.4.3 now that that buff has been doubled. And with 10 Mystic Allies total thanks to the crudest boots, that's 1,000% more damage. That damage output is 20% less than Raiment's, but we're also gaining a few damage multipliers that we wouldn't otherwise have with Raiments, thanks to having all the Mystic Allies and all the mantras. We have the mantra of Conviction, for instance, that'll be giving us 16% more damage thanks to Inna's. And then we have Fire Ally that boosts our damage by 20% with Inna's. Now, while taking these two buffs into account does make the numbers seem a lot more reasonable and a lot closer, without even getting into additive versus multiplicative bonuses, the main reason this build does less damage is because we're losing Depth Diggers. There's just no room for it in this build, which doubles our damage. So while yes, we're losing out on potential damage, we are gaining some great toughness buffs. Starting out with getting the Earth Ally that gives us 40% more health thanks to Inna's. And our Mantra of Salvation, which you would still be using with pure Raiments, is giving us 40% more all resist rather than just 20 thanks to the Inna buff. Apart from these toughness buffs, we're also gaining the Air Ally, which gives us 8 spirit regen per second. This makes it easier to stay in the Shenlong window, or easier to get into the Shenlong window and then stay there for a lot longer. Now let's briefly explain what we mean by the Shenlong window. With Shenlong set, once your spirit maxes out, you activate a big damage buff, and your spirit slowly or rapidly starts to degenerate. Once your spirit reaches 0, the buff disappears and you regularly generate spirit back up to maximum where it activates again. Now apart from this, at all times with Shenlongs, you deal more damage per point of spirit you have. So the idea of this set, of this play style, of this build, is you want to activate the Shenlong window and then keep your spirit as capped off as possible. We'll get now into the gear and the stats that you want on them, but we're just going to quickly note here that apart from what we're going to list off, you're going to want to get max spirit as a secondary stat wherever you can, as well as secondary resistance. That's really important. You'll also want to squeeze in wherever you can chance to stun on hit as a secondary property. Alright, big picture here. Overall, you want 2 pieces of Raiments. You need that 2-piece set bonus. That's what? Doubling your damage, and more attack speed in fact, so it's more than doubling your damage. And of course, you'll also want the 6-piece bonus of Inna's, which in this build we're presenting will be done with 5 pieces of Inna's plus a Ring of Royal Grandeur in your cube. Okay, let's go over your gear. For your shoulders, Raiment set, Dexterity, Vitality, Area Damage, Cooldown Reduction. For your helm, Raiment or Inna's, Dex, Socket with Diamond, Crit Chance, Vitality. For your amulet, ideally you want the Traveler's Pledge. The Endless Walk set gives us a nice mixture of a big damage buff and a big toughness buff. You'll want a Socket, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, Fire Damage. For your gloves, Inna or Raiment, Dex, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and you can go with Vitality. That's typically what you see in pure Raiment builds, but because you already have a lot more toughness, you can actually sack the Vitality, go with something like attack speed or area damage. In general, area damage will translate into more damage and higher grade rift clears, but if you want a little bit more sustain, you can go with attack speed. Basically, more attack speed does translate into more damage, but not as much as area damage. What it really means is you're hitting more often, thus you're regaining more life per hit. More often. For your chest piece, Inna or Raiments, you want 3 sockets, dexterity, vitality, and reduced damage from elites or life percent. For your wrists, ideally spirit guards. They give you a huge buff. You want fire damage, dex, crit, vitality. For your belt, you need Innas. You want dex, vitality, crippling wave damage, and all resist. Unless you're rolling a secondary resistance here, in which case you can go for life percent. For your rings, the ideal combination here is a compass rose to go with your traveler's pledge. No point in getting one without the other. A unity for solo play. Or a band of the rue chambers for multiplayer. Or if you're just ballsy and feel you can lose the toughness, you can go for band of the rue chambers. And then also ring of royal grandeur, which you'd ideally want a cube. Your ideal stats are socket, crit chance, crit damage, average damage, and dex. You could opt for attack speed here instead of average damage, and it would be the same explanation as attack speed versus area damage on your gloves. For your pants, Inna or Raiments, 2 sockets, dex, vitality, and crippling wave damage. And for your weapons, you need the Shenlong set. On one weapon you want dex, life per hit, area damage, and a socket, and on the other you want dex, area damage, cooldown reduction, and a socket. Attack speed is also a choice here as previously explained. In your cube, you want the Flying Dragon. When that triggers, that doubles your attack speed. That's a really strong buff with this build. You'll also need the Crudest Boots, as we explained. That's twice as many Mystic allies, and there's basically no point in running Innas without the Crudest Boots. And as we said, the Ring of Royal Grandeur to get your full 6-piece bonus of Innas. For our gems, in our pants and chest, if you're pushing the higher greater rifts, you'll likely need the toughness, so go for diamonds. Otherwise, at lower difficulties, you can opt for more damage and emeralds. For your legendary gems, Simplicity Strength, that's a no-brainer. That gem was designed for generators. We'll want a Bane of the Trapped, because, obviously, it's just more damage all the time once you get it to level 25. And you'll also want a Bane of the Stricken. Now, often I advocate for either Bane of the Powerful or Bane of the Stricken, depending on how high of a rift level you're pushing, but in most circumstances here, you'll be going for Bane of the Stricken, because you're attacking so fast, so often, that you're going to stack up those Stricken stacks very quickly. For our Paragon points, in core, get your total move speed up to 25%, then max out your spirit, because again that means more damage, then dexterity. For offense, crit chance, crit damage, cooldown reduction, and attack speed. For defense, all resist, life, armor. And for utility, area damage, life on hit, resource cost reduction. Now for your skills, the skills are virtually the same as a straight up Raiment monk. Our main attack is going to be Crippling Wave Mangle. It's possibly the best monk generator. It spreads out a little bit in area damage. It gives us a good amount of spirit generation. Next we'll want Dashing Strike Radiance. Dashing Strike is the monk's mobility skill. You need that to get out of tight situations. And that buff that we get from Radiance increases our attack speed, so that's a nice way as well to bump up that attack speed. Next we want Cyclone Strike Implosion, which just increases the range on that Cyclone Strike. We need this for grouping enemies together to apply our area damage. Next we want Breath of Heaven infused with light. This is mostly just to regain or maintain your spirit. You want to use it right before you know you're going to be attacking a lot, to boost up that spirit. This is critical to staying in our Shenlong window and maximizing our spirit. Next we'll want Epiphany Desert Shroud. This is just a great monk skill. It doubles your toughness, gives you a huge amount of spirit regen, and even a teleport ability. You want to maintain as much uptime on this as possible, but of course saving it for the important fights. This will basically ensure that you're topped off and near maxed at the Shenlong window, if you're doing everything right. Then lastly, we're taking Mantra of Salvation Agility. You want to pop this for a dodge chance buff. You know, do it when you're expecting some damage to come in. For our passives, we want Seize the Initiative. Why? More attack speed. We want Alacrity. Why? More attack speed. Next, we want Beacon of Etar. That's going to give us more uptime on Desert Shroud and allow us to pop our Breath of Heaven more often. And then lastly, we want Harmony. This is more toughness. This is, again, an excellent monk skill, but it's imperative if you're using this to get those secondary resistances on your gear. And that wraps up this guide. The rest of this video will just be finishing this Greater Rift. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this build. Would you play it? Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders to keep up with Diablo builds.
What you ask is guardian.